Once again, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we are going to be having a discussion with Dr. Amy Banks and Mr. Isaac Knapper. They co-wrote a book together called Fighting Time, and they are going to be telling us their story. It's a difficult story, but it's an important one. So at this point, I want to tell you a little bit about the authors we're going to be hearing from. So Dr. Amy Banks is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist and founding scholar at the International Center for Growth and Connection. She is also the author of Wired to Connect, the surprising link between brain science and strong, healthy relationships. Isaac Knapper is the head trainer of the Crescent City Boxing Gym in New Orleans, where he's joining us from tonight, quite far away from Maine. He is passionate about helping kids avoid the trauma that he experienced in the justice system that wrongfully convicted him of murder as a teenager. So without further ado, I welcome our guests, and I'd like to start by turning the program over to Dr. Amy Banks. Thank you. All right, Amy, you can unmute yourself and hop in.
There we go. Are you all set? You can.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Julia, for having us. It is a particular pleasure for me, having spent so much of my life and actually my childhood in Camden, Maine. And in fact, just this past October, when Isaac and I did a talk in Maine, I had the opportunity to actually bring Isaac and his wife, Denise, to Camden. So they've, kind of seen the town, and it's really special. I didn't know where the story would go, right? And we still Isaac and I don't know where the story does go, will go, or what have you, but it's been such a treat for me to see these various places in Maine, particularly given that was, sort of where I am from, to be able to share this story. And in a sense, for people who may have remembered the story of my father's murder, so many years ago, back in 1979, to maybe, sort of like hear the rest of the story, where did things end up? So, thank you, Julia. Thank you, Camden Public Library. And thank you, Isaac, for coming in October and joining us here. I'm really excited to do this. So I'm going to now share. We have so for people to know, we have a slideshow that sort of frames some of the conversation we'll have tonight, what we want to share with you. And then, as Julia said, we're hoping to end up with some questions and at the end that you might have sort of along the way. So let me go ahead and share. Hold on. And there we go. Does that work, Julia?
Yes, that looks good. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the book. Isaac and I wrote this together over the last actually 6 years. We wrote it from about 2015 to working on it right up until about 2020. And it really is our story from the moment of my father's murder up until Isaac and I meeting with Denise, his wife, and my sister Nancy in 2015. I love, kind of along the way when you're doing a writing project, one of the things you have to do is, ask people to take a read and, see if they like it, or, would they say anything. And I just love this quote from Jennifer Thompson, because I feel like it captures a little bit of the kind of unusual nature of our story. She says, Fighting Time is not just a book about the injustice of wrongful conviction, but a love story of the capacity of human beings to find power in the pain and healing in the harm. And I thought that was just such a unique way of capturing, the story from start to finish, and so kind of appreciative of both the words, but also the experience that I've had in getting to know Isaac Knapper, the man, over this period of time, and just, really happy to be sharing this story with you tonight. So, and Isaac and I will tag team. Isaac, do you want to say anything? I feel like actually it's a little bit awkward for me to just jump in and boom, even just, by way of saying hi, so people can get familiar with your voice.
Yes, well, you're doing a great job, as always. I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Julia, for having us and letting us be a part of this. It's very important to me and Amy, and very appreciative.
Yeah. Thanks, Isaac. So let me jump in, and we usually start at this place because part of what's been kind of interesting for me, or kind of intriguing, was that when my father was murdered in 1979 and Isaac was arrested, Isaac and I were the same age. We are the same age still, obviously, as the years go on. And I think this photo for me captures so much, right? So it was taken my senior year in high school. The murder happened in April of 1979. I'll get into that in just a second, but this is a picture of me, my senior year in high school, and a picture of Isaac in that same year. And you can see what I got to do, because what I got to do is keep doing what I love, right? Play basketball. That was my whole life. And, it's actually very interesting, like where the book started. But the point being, here I am free, right? If you look at these two pictures, neither one of us had killed anybody. Isaac on the right side is now a 17-year-old boy in the bloodiest prison in the United States, having been convicted of a murder, the murder of my father, that he didn't do. So imagine that. This is two trajectories. Isaac spent the next 12, 13 years in Angola, literally fighting for his life, while I got to, graduate from high school, do all the milestones, go to college, go to medical school, do my residency, come out, get a job, and, it's important to me that when people start listening to the story, that they really get the depth of loss, of grief, of pain that Isaac, his family, have had to go through because of just a case of horrendous systemic racism in the legal system that exists, I think, to this day. So this, to me, is just such an illustration of that people might not catch. There he is, on the right-hand side. Isaac is there with his boxing gloves, and you could think maybe he's if it didn't say underneath there that he's in the Louisiana State Penitentiary, you might not know that he's in prison. And at that point, he literally was told that he was going to spend the rest of his life there, no chance of parole. So that's where the story starts. Actually, it starts a little sooner, right? So for people in Maine, anybody who was around in 1979, you may or may not have remembered waking up to this this headline in the Portland Press Herald, the Bangor Daily News, Camden Herald, all of the papers at the time. As most of you know, murder wasn't something that happened routinely in Maine. It wasn't a high crime area. And so, having one of our citizens traveled to New Orleans for a conference, which was what my dad went to, and to be held up and murdered was big news and kind of plastered in all the papers. But this was also what my family woke up to. And just as a little bit of a segue, not even a segue, but a little kind of backtrack, both my parents, my mother was born and raised in Camden. We spent much of our summers in Camden. My grandmother had a cottage on Coleman's Pond. Camden, we spent hours with my dad reading the New York Times at the harbor on the benches while we got Camden chocolate donuts and rocket lemonade, just hanging out as kids. So we have such deep roots in Maine. My dad he graduated from Camden High School, as did my mom. But anyway, so so here he is. This is what we wake up to. That the day that he was murdered, he traveled to New Orleans for a history conference. He was a professor at the University of Maine, Orono. Our life was very much centered around the university, around academics, around education. That was really kind of the heart and soul of what our lives were about. This is a picture that is actually fairly devastating every time I see it to this day. But this is a picture of my father being read his last rites on the streets of New Orleans by Peter Rogers, apparently, with detectives. Those are the detectives that were investigating the crime at the time. To the right, you can see there, I don't know if this shows up my pointer, but you can see this guy right here. He's really quite important in this story. His name is John Dillman, and he comes, just know he comes into play coming up. So you can imagine, I found out, my family found out about the murder late on a Thursday night when my parents' best friends, Charlie Scontris and Joanne Scontris, drove up from the University of Maine. They had been told about the murder from the guy that was with my father, John Hackla. He had been also a professor. They traveled together. They went out to dinner at the French Quarter and then came back and were held up right in front of the Hyatt Regency Hotel and shot. He was shot and really died, was killed immediately. Nothing happened for my family. I don't want to say nothing happened. I mean, there's many gory details of what did happen, including, the grief and the just shock that my family entered, the freeze state that happens when you have this kind of trauma, unexpected trauma. And, so we were busy doing all of the death rituals and burying my father and trying to figure out how the heck you move on after murder. And, this was a time long before school shootings. And, we didn't have any idea how one got over a tragedy of this kind. So that was in April. In May, about three and a half weeks later, I was blindsided, actually, looking at literally taking the Bangor Daily News, and this photograph showed up. And this is my introduction to Isaac Knapper. Isaac, you want to say a little bit about kind of your association to this picture?
Yeah, well, actually, I was coming out of central lockup, which is a county jail in Orleans Parish. And they had brought me to central lockup to interrogate me and everything. And also my mom brought me some clothes down there because when they arrested me, they took me to prison with my underwears on and they wouldn't let me put on clothes. So my mom had to bring these clothes and I put those clothes on and then they cuffed me up and they was bringing me out of central lockup, bringing me over to the house of detention to transferring me over to another part of the jail where they father the interrogation and to try and force you to confess. Right. And so they kind of like did everything right here on this picture right here. That was, I want to say maybe about a few weeks later, I end up in Charity Hospital. They had fractured my ribs, broke my ribs on the right side, and they had to take blood clogs out of my body because they had stomped me and beat me real bad. And so right here on this picture, I had been in the hospital for about 8 weeks because they had to operate and all that and everything. And through all this here, they drugged me down steps like 4 stories, drugged me from 4 stories down to the bottom with my feet in the air, with shackles on my feet, and my hands was cuffed behind my back, and my head would hit every step going down while they was dragging me down the steps. And they put me in solitary confinement in an area that was no longer being used inside the prison. That area had been closed down for maybe about 7 or 8 years. And it was like an old storage area with number spider webs, rats and roaches and all kind of stuff running around up there. They had to pry the bars open to put me in there. That was part of the tech. It was part of the, I guess it was part of the,
they're kind of their techniques, right? I mean, this was
part of it to try and get me to confess. And being a young kid, I just refused. My mom was so worried and scared when she found out I was hurt and everything, and they brought me to the hospital. So she came to the hospital. She went and spoke with the chief of the county jail, and they got me. And from what we understand, he didn't even know that they had me in that area of the jail. But they got me, and he put me in his car personally and rushed me to Charity Hospital when he seen my condition. And so after leaving the hospital, they brought me back to the jail, but the interrogation, it never stopped. It didn't stop all the way up until the trial date. They would constantly, and that was where I was in this building right here. In fact, that's the court building, the courthouse. And right next to it over here where the air is pointing at, that's the jail, that's the parish prison, county jail, where they had me housed at. And so when I make it back, they put me on another tier on B4. And I thought maybe the interrogation would probably be over with. They wasn't gonna mess with me no more, but I was wrong. They still continue to come harass me. They would come in the middle of the night. Sometime I would be laying in that cell, in a cold cell with no mattress and on a steel bunk. And they would come like 2 and 3 in the morning and hit on the bars real hard. Get your ass up. You know, they would holler and scream. So all that was part of it, you know, for them to do what they was trying to do. And like I said, in the beginning, they had scared my mother half to death. She thought that they was gonna actually kill me in there. And my mom, so she asked me, they spoke to my mom, and my mom said, well, why are y'all beating him like this? Why are y'all doing this here to him? He didn't do anything. And they said, well, if you want to see your son live, you need to talk with him and get him to confess because he committed that crime. My mom said, but he said he did not commit that crime, you know, and they said, well, he did it. And if you don't get him to confess, he'll wind up dying one way or another. He'll die in prison. He'll get the death sentence, and he would get found guilty for first-degree murder, and they will electrocute him. So if you don't want to see him die, you need to try and talk some sense in his head, get him to confess. And so my mom they gave her a special visit to come inside the prison to talk with me, to try and get me to confess because she was afraid. And she said, Jerry, I believe you didn't do it, but at least you would live and I'll be able to come visit you sometime. Said, because they're gonna kill you if you don't confess. And I told Mom, I said, Mom, I'm not gonna confess to something I don't know anything about. Yeah, you know, and if I have to die for what I believe, I mean, it's just have to happen that way because I'm not gonna say I did something that I didn't do. And I explained to my mom, you taught me that. You know, she said, yeah, I know, Jerry, but they trying to kill you. You know, she always called me Jerry. She never called me Isaac.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think it's important that people understand this is not a one-off situation. This was something that was routinely done, and as far as I know, still happens some, right, in the prison system, which is basically they pick somebody up, often a young man of color, and then basically try to, you know, break them, right? I mean, and that's certainly what my understanding of what they were trying to do with you, with, you know, beating you and all the while he's in prison and they're trying to beat the confession out of him, even as he's saying, no, I didn't do it. What they're telling us, so the you know, authorities would call us and give us updates, and the updates were that, you know, they would say that, you know we have the right guy. They started right from the get-go when they picked him up with, you know, kind of an ongoing kind of defaming his character as a young man, basically saying, you know, he's a bad egg, you know he did this, we've been trying to get him for a long time. So my family kind of just took it, everything they were saying. We had no reason to question it, right? We thought that they were looking out for our best interest. And you know, to find out so many years later that this was not the case was horrifying. This is a picture that let me share this. This is actually the trial, as Isaac said. This is where he had his trial. My brother went to the trial, and I'll never forget my brother's description of the end of the trial. So imagine this here. Isaac, he is there, his family there is there. He's fighting for his life, literally, right? My family is told about a week, you know, maybe 2 weeks, I'm not quite sure of the timing, but what we were told was we need to begin to prepare for the fact that Isaac may be released. Not because he didn't do it, but because that one of their witnesses disappeared and they just don't have the evidence. And then miraculously, right, about a week, 2 weeks or whatever, before the trial, our team, allegedly our team, I say that, you know, not believing at all that they were our team at this point. But you know what the lawyers were saying, all of a sudden they were almost giddy because they said, okay, you know, great, we're going to trial. The other guy, so Isaac had been picked up, and another guy, Leroy Williams. And apparently, and certainly Isaac, correct me if I'm wrong, but they gave both of them the same deal. They came to Isaac and said, listen, we know that Leroy did the actual shooting, and if you testify that he did that, you'll get a lesser sentence. They did the same thing to Leroy, and Leroy's, you know, that if they said to Leroy, we know Isaac did it, and if you testify against him, you'll get a lesser sentence. Leroy took it. He decided he would do that. And so literally Isaac had a 1-day trial for his life. 1 day that he was tried. My family expected it to be, you know, kind of a week, or, you know, imagine there would be a lot. But by the end of the first day, Isaac was convicted of murder, despite the fact that there was a number of people, family members. There was actually even a guard that was coming out of the Hyatt Regency. It was at her end of shift, and she got a look at the shooter and said it wasn't Isaac. Despite all of that, they went by Leroy Williams' statement that Isaac had done it. Isaac was convicted, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. And as I understand it, Isaac, is this right? You literally missed the death penalty by like 1 vote of it being unanimous or something like that, right?
Yeah, one lady, she said, no, I did not vote for the death sentence, because it's possible that that young man can be innocent.
Yeah.
See, so I'm not voting for the death sentence. So they couldn't give me the death sentence unless it would have been unanimous. With her not agreeing, well, it was actually 2 of them. With those 2 ladies not agreeing with it, they had to drop it down. They kept it at first-degree murder, which carries the death sentence, the maximum of death. Yeah, and so they didn't drop it down to second-degree murder until I came back on court order, maybe about 11, 12 years later. That's when they dropped it down to. But the reason why they actually couldn't give me the death sentence was my age. I was too young to be electrocuted at that time. They can trial me as an adult, but they couldn't give me the capital punishment. Right. And so I learned that. Yeah. That was one of the reasons that they didn't give me the death sentence. Right. Now, on that picture right there, that's in the field.
Yeah. So I was going to say, let me just say, so he's convicted in 1-day trial. He is sentenced to life in prison in Angola, which, if anybody knows anything about Angola, the history of Angola, it used to be literally a cotton plantation, and it is not far from that, and certainly wasn't when Isaac was there. So with that introduction, Isaac, share a little bit about, so there you are at 17 years old, right? In yes. Angola. Share a little bit about, we have a few slides that sort of describe Angola.
So and that's the kind of work that they do. It's like Amy said, it was a plantation, and that's modern slavery right there. We pick cotton, we use these hoes to chop ditches. The guard on the horseback, they have their guns, and if anything break out or somebody try, you can't really escape or run. That's 24,000 acres of land, and it's surrounded by swamp. So some people try and escape from that prison. They be gone 3 and 4 days, and when they look out the woods, they still inside the prison. And so they just turn themselves back in. But the place, that is cruel and unusual punishment. Some guys would cut their 2 fingers off, take a knife and just chop those 2 fingers off to keep from going out there in the field. And some of them will chop their big toe off their feet. They'll pay somebody to do it, pay them a carton of cigarettes to chop his toe off, so he can get a permanent duty status. A duty status, they call it light duty. Light duty is when you still matter. You can get your heart cut out. You're gonna still work in Angola, but you won't be going out there in the field. You'll be working like on a compound, sweeping the compound or something like that, or picking up paper. But you're gonna have to do some kind of work, no matter what your condition are, But
yeah. And here, yeah, I'm gonna speak to that.
Yeah, and that's the cell block. And I happened to be in that cell block there. I was in cell 8, and it's the cell block is, they call it extended lockdown. You lock down, you know, and you could watch TV, and that's what I would do, stand up at the bars, because you couldn't see it if you sit down in the cell. So you stand up, just stand in your cell, stand up and watch TV, and you know, the guys will vote. They will vote on what channel they want the TV on. And so after they get their votes and whoever win, that's what they put the TV on, and we just watch TV. They would serve the food, come bring the food for breakfast. They would bring the whatever they didn't have but cream of wheat or either grits for breakfast. That was the whole, for the 13 years I was there, that's all I ever seen was cream of wheat and grits for breakfast. And lunch, same old thing. On certain days, you already know what you're gonna get, you know what's coming. You know, they may have beans and rice with greens, but they grow their own food too. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah. It's self-contained. Angola, they don't go outside the prison for anything. We know that they're the bloodiest prison in America. Every week, somebody's getting their throat cut, getting killed, getting hung. One way or another, somebody's gonna die every week in that prison. And so it's just, yeah, it kind of, it gives me chills and stuff to even think about it. You know, right now today, I still kind of get nervous when I talk about Angola.
Yeah, and you know, Isaac, you know, what I would say is, you know, in the book, if people, I hope people get it and I hope they'll read it, but the chapter that you wrote on Angola was honestly one of the most horrifying things I've ever read, quite literally, what you lived through, you know, the kinds of things that you had to see that no human being should have to see, let alone a 17-year-old boy, right? And my God, if you can read that chapter and not believe that there needs to be prison reform, you know, you've got a pretty hard heart. Yeah, I mean, and this was part of it, right? The weapons. You want to? Yeah,
that's the shanks. Actually, knives. They make those weapons in Angola. Like I said, they self-contained. They don't go outside the prison for anything. They grow all their own, the food that they eat. They grow it. And these weapons here was made. They have an area in there. It's called a tag plant. They make the license plate for the Louisiana license that goes on the back of a vehicle, and the machine that they cut that iron with to make these license plates, that's the same machine they use to make these shanks. You know, so everybody have one. It's even the preachers, the guys that's preaching and everything, they have them a big shank too. So everybody have a knife in Angola, because you need one to defend yourself. Because you never know when somebody gonna come up to you. Like when I first got there, I was in A block in the cell block, and they had this guy. It was the first murder that I witnessed with my own eyes. The guy came to my cell, and he said, Red. He said, when they let us out, because at the last meal, it was like they was trying to give us a little conversation, I guess, by allowing us to go walk to the kitchen for the last meal. They would bring our breakfast to the cell, and they would bring our lunch to the cell. But the dinner, they would let us walk to the kitchen to go eat. Well, anyway, this guy Duck, and mentioning Duck, I just seen him today. He got he got out of Angola, but he killed 4 people in Angola. Anyway, Duck, he got into it with a guy named Faris Phillip. And Mose Murray, he said, Red, he said, bro, if you go into the kitchen, you better bring your knife with you. I said, bring my knife with me? I don't have a knife. He said, you don't have a knife? What you mean you don't have a knife? I said, I just got here, you know. He said, well, Red, you need to have a knife. You need to get your knife. He said, because if you go into the kitchen. I said, well, why would I have to bring a knife to the kitchen? He said, because it's meant to go down. Big Duck and Faris Phillip had some words, and Duck told him, when you come to the kitchen, bring your knife with you. So they're gonna have a knife fight in the kitchen. because they can't get to each other in the cell block. So when they let us out to go to the kitchen, that's when everybody's together. Now you can come in contact with each other. But Barry Phillip didn't show up, but two of his best friends showed up, and Duck killed one of them. He stabbed him in the chest, busted his heart wide open, and he tried to get at the other one, but the other guy was running, and he was trying to kill them too because Sparrows didn't show up. So, and that's what guys was doing. If you hang with a person and that person get into it with somebody, if they can't get you, they'll get him. The person that hangs with you, they'll try to kill him. So, and that's some of the things that we was going through. That was the first time I seen a killing happen, and I was standing right there when that happened in the kitchen, in the child hall, when Pouncer got killed. And then it went on.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just went on to start getting, it started being normal to see somebody get killed in Angola. It was. Yeah.
So Isaac, you know, as we're kind of going through this story, which is, you know, a 36-year story. So imagine, so this is where Isaac is from 17 basically to 29, almost 30, right?
Yeah.
And along comes, I know Burl Cain, right? And Lori White, who was a young lawyer at the time. And I guess as the story goes, Isaac, your mom found her, right? She was a young defense attorney or whatever. And you want to say a little bit about how you got off? Because that was somewhat of a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah, Judge Lori, she's a good friend of mine. She's my best friend. And right now, today, we still friends, real close. We talk to each other just about every week, every other day or whatever. We'll make sure we stay in contact. But my mom had got in touch with Lori, and at the time she had just converted over from a district attorney, and she was going to become a lawyer and a defense attorney. And when she come visit me, she was much younger, and I asked her, I said, are you a lawyer? She said, well, technically, I will be. You. I just would appreciate if you would allow me to work on your case. So this will be my first case as a lawyer. I said, your first case? I said, this is a high profile case. I said, why would you want to tackle something like this, your very first case as a lawyer? She said, because I read about your case and I believe you're innocent. Yeah. And I want to do everything I could to try and help you.
Right. So let's, Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, let me go ahead. So part of this was, again, Burl Cain had said, you know, do you have, you know, you need to get the police report. And so Burl Carter, sorry. Who is Burl Cain? Was he the head of
the warden?
Yeah, who's the warden, right? In the like 90s or something. Anyway, so this is a great picture of Isaac. One of the things that is important to know through this, and we might not have so much time to focus on it tonight, but you know, to me, one of the things that saved you in prison was boxing, right? Being kind of just an incredible boxer, holding the championship for 9 years, and really having a reputation that people aren't going to mess with, right? They knew better than to fight with you, and probably saved your life.
Yeah.
But so his mom was able, so Burl Carter had said, you know, we need the police report. Nobody had seen a police report. And so, you know, Isaac was able to get a hold of his mother, who went to the police and shockingly came back with this thing called the Dillman file. And let me just say a little bit about this, because when we found out about it, and all of this is not, you know, you're kind of looking at this, it's not so important, but what is important is this is the actual document, right? Is that there was a document that had what's called Brady materials, exculpatory evidence, right? And some people, maybe if you're in the legal profession, know that the Brady laws say that basically the prosecution has to give the defense material that they have, right? All their material to have a fair and just trial. And come to find out, there was this police report that was not shared with Isaac's defense team. This is it. And if you can imagine, one of the things that was so dramatic that was in this Dillman report was the fact that 1 week after my father was murdered, 1 week, 1 block from where he was murdered, 3 men that fit the description of the men that murdered my father, including one that was wearing a sailor cap, sort of one of those, kind of funny sailor caps, so it was actually quite specific. And the kicker was that the gun they used to hold up this couple was the gun that was used to kill my father, with 1 bullet missing, which was the bullet that killed my father, right? Ballistics test showed. So basically, if you talk about the smoking gun, this was it. This wasn't turned over to the defense, right? This information that, as most reporters say, would have, not only, probably would have led to Isaac's release, period, right? Because, clearly those guys were the one that was involved with my father's murder, not Isaac. And so with this information, Lori White, went through a series of, I think it was still, even after you had this, it was a good year or so, year and a half before you got out of prison, right? They had to go through all the motions and all of that.
Still a couple of years.
Yeah, still a couple of years with that kind of information, that basically proves that, you weren't the one that did this. You're still in prison for another 2 years until you're finally exonerated, right?
Right.
Now, one of the things, part of the story is that nobody told my family, right? So we had no idea that Isaac had been wrongly convicted or that he was free. And so, again, and all of this is in the book, but Isaac came out and imagine how hard this is to do. He literally started an amateur boxing career, with a lot of support, emotional and financial support from Lori White and her husband. And, I think really so many people who were, cheering for you and wanted, really saw this as kind of an incredible injustice, right? To rob you of your youth. And, and again, I want to say is that you don't have to say it. Isaac was already a Golden Gloves boxing champion before he went to prison. I mean, this was his passion and it was his love, and it was what was stolen from him on all of those years, the chance to legitimately vie for perhaps the world championship in boxing. He's in prison, at boxing rather than out. He came out, he started amateur boxing again, was 1 bout short of going to the Barcelona Olympics in 1992, and then actually had a professional boxing career. All of this was happening unknown to my family because nobody told us that this was now an open murder case. Okay. We had no idea. We're all sitting around trying to kind of pick our lives up and go on with life. Let me see. This slide I think is out of sorts a little bit. This was supposed to be the placeholder. Silence says a lot more than you think, right? Why? To this day, I can't understand why no one told us, right? We didn't have a chance to ask somebody to reopen the case, to kind of maybe see if some of the guys that had been arrested, a week later might have done it. I mean, nothing. We got nothing. And until 2004, I think it was, when this is Gary, who is my sister, Nancy, is her husband. And Gary, kind of out of the blue one day, Googled Isaac Knapper, right? So now we're in the mid 2000s, everything's going online, Googles Isaac Knapper. He'd done it before, but this time he did it by spelling his name accurately with a K. So his name spelled Knapper, not Napper. And all of a sudden, Gary's at his computer, all of this information pops up, right? About Isaac's wrongful conviction, about his boxing career, about, all that's transpired. And, as Gary remembered it, he's basically sitting there like, oh shit, now what, right? He ended up, of course, telling, this is my sister, Nancy. And actually, I'm pretty sure she's on maybe either the OWL or the OLAD in Camden Harbor there, just saying. So she was my dad's youngest child. She was 8 at the time of his murder. She was also getting her PhD in history like my dad. And she did like everything she could to, I'm going to backtrack, to try to get the case opened. She wrote to the DA, to the police, to victims advocates down there, and essentially got the same thing. Sad, but not unusual for New Orleans, right? This was, I mean, I've met through Isaac already from my time in New Orleans. I've met, I don't know how many guys I've met, Isaac, that were in a similar boat, guys wrongly convicted they're in for 27 years, 30, I mean, like absurd amounts of time, right? In equally kind of crazy, unjust situations, I would say. And so then you back up to the other slide, what happened? By 2005, a couple of things happened. One is I ended up actually getting ovarian cancer, sadly. And, so kind of all of my family's focus, I feel like, kind of moved away from that. We were getting nothing done, nobody was interested. And then Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans. And I think, my sister and I particularly just felt like, okay, if there were any records, we were also trying to get records. If there are any records, there's no hope of getting them now, right? Everything's been decimated in New Orleans. And interestingly, the picture on the right here, the Superdome, of course, where I think a lot of people probably remember just this horrendous scene of, despair. I mean, what level despair? I think there was a hell of a lot of racism in play in terms of how Hurricane Katrina was handled, and who was hurt by it. But this is the exact, this is the spot where my father was murdered, actually, right there at the Hyatt Regency in the Superdome. So we kind of just buckled in and decided, okay, there's nothing we can do about this, right? I mean, this is just another sad, kind of part of a very sad story. I have to say, when I heard and read the details of what was not revealed at the time of the murder, and heard that Isaac, as a 17-year-old boy, 16, 17-year-old boy, had been wrongly convicted in prison in this place, it was simply devastating, right? Bad enough that my father's murder was unsolved, all of that. But to now know that it had been associated with the demise of a whole other family that had nothing to do with it, right, was devastating. And, one of the things I often say is the only thing worse than, I think, having somebody in your life murdered, particularly your parent, is then having somebody wrongly convicted, right? It was horrendous. So my family, we kind of went on with life because it's kind of what we do. It's what we do in Maine, right? In stoic Maine. But for me, as a psychiatrist and as a parent, these are my two kids that at age 16, what started to happen for me, people often say this, why did you reach out to Isaac? Why did you want to meet him? And what happened to me is that my kids, who were twins, they were about to turn 16, was the age that Isaac and I were. And stuff in me was just bubbling up. I mean, the grief, the sadness, it was almost like I could look at them and see how incredibly young Isaac and I were for what we went through at that time. And on a whim, I was in Pennsylvania, at a place that we go to in Pennsylvania this summers. And I one night thought, I got to do something. I didn't know what I was going to do. I sat down at a computer and I decided I would reach out to Lori White. I knew that she had been involved, and I thought maybe she could give me some information. I don't know quite what I was looking for. It was just that, it was like a hairball of unresolved grief and trauma that was in me, and confusion, and not knowing, what had happened and how to move into this place as that grief was just, kind of bowling over within me. And so I wrote her, I found her email. She was now a judge, I found out, in New Orleans. And I wrote her a note that was just basically like, hi there, I'm Amy Banks. You were involved in getting Isaac Knapper exonerated. He had murdered, my understanding was he'd murdered my father. And I would like to talk to you about it, right? And I sent it off, and I really thought I wouldn't hear back. Right. Or if I did, it would go into bureaucracy. I might hear back in a month or 2 months, whatever. She wrote me back in 24 hours. I was shocked. I was thrilled. I was scared. I mean, it was a whole lot of things. We started a series of a few conversations and back and forth where she told me more about Isaac. all stuff that was, just both broke my heart and opened my heart to what this man, had been through. And I finally said, do you think he would meet? So Isaac, I know she then reached out to you and said, would you meet? But do you want to speak to that a little bit? What that was?
When the judge, when she called me and she said, I received a email from Dr. Amy Banks, the daughter of Dr. Ronald Banks, who you was accused of murdering. And she said, you don't have to answer this right now. You got time to think about it. But she would like to meet you. And I was I didn't know what to say, but I said, wow. I was like kind of puzzled. Why would she want to meet me and everything? And Lori, she said, Isaac, take your time. Don't answer it right now. Just wait, think about it, sleep on it, call me back tomorrow or the next day or a week from now. We got time. You don't have to rush into anything. And after she said that, I said, well, I thought about it. Mm-hmm. She said, you don't have, I said, yes, I thought about it. I said, if it would help any, I wouldn't mind meeting Amy, Dr. Amy, and I thought about her sister so many years. When I read in the newspaper that the Dr. Banks had a daughter that was 8 years old, and I used to think about her. I said, wow, she lost her father at 8 years old, and it's got to be real hard for her. So I used to think about her all the time. And when Lori told me that Amy and Nancy was willing to come down here to meet me, I said, well, this is the opportunity. I'll get a chance to meet Nancy, the 8-year-old. And I, so I told her if it would help any, yes, I'll meet them.
Yeah.
Me and my wife came down when they flew down here.
Yeah. And, what I want to say about that, Isaac, is, for me, that was, one of the moments of, what I would say is sort of transformative healing for me is, to go from, having my, as I say, my internal world kind of had equated for, over 25 years. My father's death was with Isaac Knapper, right? I mean, he was in there, he was in my head in this way. And though I think I was always too traumatized to even know whether to feel angry or whatever, I mean, it was just kind of frozen. But, think about the contrast of hearing that, and this was stuff that, Isaac shared, and I'll tell you about it in a minute, but hearing that this young boy, the 17-year-old boy who's now in Angola, the whole time that these prosecutors are feeding my family lines and stories about what a bad ass he is, right? How, X, Y, or Z. I mean, just defaming him left and right. He's actually thinking about my sister in Angola, while he's in Angola, that there's an 8, I mean, I now know, because I know Isaac, and he's, grown to be such a dear, friend and almost a brother to me, that to think about, that this is his heart. This is who he is. This guy they described was some caricature of, maybe their biggest fears. I don't know what it was, but it was clearly designed to convince us that the person they had was the one that killed my father, and to get a conviction no matter what. That was what the name of the game was. And I want to say a little bit, Isaac, both of us, I think at this point, often in our talks reference this moment because it was so profound. We literally met in Lori White's chambers. This is where this picture is taken from. We met for good, a couple of hours, and we literally, as we're sitting there, he's sharing, this just gut-wrenching, story about his, we knew none of this, the brutal beating, the interrogations, all of what he had been through, what it was like in Angola. We didn't know any of this, right? We just knew the frame of the story. And somewhere in the, kind of in the middle, after an hour or so, Denise had said, had looked at Nancy and I and said, God, it must have been so hard for you. And your father was murdered, which, was, actually both very touching. And, Nancy and I are kind of looking at each other, and it's really, I mean, it's not something we've talked about a lot, even with dear friends. And, it just was like a black mark in our lives. And, and so we both kind of tried to say a little bit about it, kind of not doing a very good job of it. And, I said something about, I think, Nancy was young, she was just 8 when this happened. And Isaac kind of jumped in and started sharing that when he was in Angola, he remembered thinking about Nancy and wanting to reach out to her and to try to comfort her in some way because she has lost her father, right? And I remember I'm like just, my heart is just, ugh. I look over at my sister who's just got her head in her hands, trying not to just sob. And without missing a beat, Isaac just looked at her and said, "Can I give you a hug?" And, so there we are all in there. It gives me chills to this day with Isaac and Nancy hugging, in the middle of the judge's chambers. And we're all just in tears. And that really, I don't know, that cemented something for me, cemented, you can call it an attachment or whatever, but it was just like, okay, this is what was going on. Here we are. This is Denise. Can't have a slideshow without Isaac's amazing wife, Denise. This is Denise. And don't ask me what Lori was doing with the rabbit. I have no idea, but it gives you a little insight into Lori White. I'm going to go quickly through a little bit of the rest of the weekend, the weekend, Isaac, and I want to leave, just looking at the time, I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. I know, Julia, you said we could go over a little bit if people have questions. So the weekend, we ended up spending most of the weekend with Isaac and his wife. And we talked to that first meeting about doing a book. Isaac had already written a 400-page manuscript, actually, that he had wanted to get published. They took us on a tour of the 9th Ward of Louisiana. I mean, they were just so warm and so generous, and it was so surreal, wasn't it, Isaac? I mean, I still have these kind of, memories of Denise sort of craning her head back and looking at the 2 white girls in the back of the car being like, is this really happening? What? This is so weird, kind of stuff. And it was, but it was also incredibly rich and deep. Here's Isaac. We actually got a chance to go to the gym he was working at. This is him when he was a younger version of himself and, kind of a very accomplished boxer, professional at one point. Here we are at the gym. I've cut out the picture where I'm doing the boxing. Okay, Isaac, I thought that was really humiliating. I'm not going to say this is the prosecuting attorney, and I'm not going to tell the story of that. It's in the book. Nancy and I actually met with the prosecution, this guy, while we were in Louisiana. It was stunning at the level. We didn't tell him that we had met Isaac already and that we believed his story. He still was saying he had the right person. He was convinced he had the right person. He was still maintaining that argument, like right up until 36 years later, despite being brought up on charges for wrongful prosecution. I mean, on and on. And then, as if it didn't get, if it wasn't surreal enough, we actually had an opportunity to go back to Angola together. Isaac and I with another, there was a group, Lori runs a prison reform program there, and went to kind of talk to some of the inmates. And we had this opportunity to literally tour Angola. And, here we are getting into the van that took us around. Let's see, there you are, Isaac.
Yeah.
You want to say a little bit about Michael? I mean, or lunch? Yeah.
Yeah, that Michael, my friend, we was real close friends in prison and before prison. And Michael, he ended up serving 42 years.
Yeah.
And in fact, for a crime he did not commit, but his case didn't get overturned. He made parole after 42 years. And with the stipulations that he still has on pins and needles, because if he get a traffic ticket, they can send him back to prison with life, because he has a life sentence parole now.
Yeah.
Even though he's home, all he do is work every day. He goes to work. he tried not to have an off day, but they told him they got to give him an
Yeah.
off day. He can't work 7 days a week. And all he want to do is just work.
Yeah.
And it's so sad when he's not at work, he kind of be afraid to come out.
Yeah.
You know, he looks out the window. Sometimes he'll sit outside on the porch, but he'd be afraid that something may happen. They may try and lock him up again for anything, because when you're on parole, you can get violated for just about anything. You know, you can be jaywalking, cross the street and get violated if they want to violate you.
Yeah.
And with him having a life sentence over his head,
Right. I
he'd
mean,
be afraid to leave out the house.
yeah. And, you know, one of the things that I remember, Isaac, was when we were sitting there, he said something about, you know, he didn't, at that point, there wasn't anything to leave for because everybody in his life had died while he was in prison. Right. I mean, that's part of the legacy for, you know, a lot of these guys, which is just, and if you get into some of the prison reform movements, I mean, there's a rich literature on, you know, what is just in the legal system. And certainly this isn't it. I want to, let's wrap up, Isaac. I want to say just a couple of things and then just see if we can take a few questions. The book came out in this past November, and it has allowed us the opportunity to kind of use it as a platform to really talk about these issues, everything from systemic racism in the criminal justice system, you know, wrongful conviction, mass incarceration, you know, all the issues that I think are so prominent today. And this was, we actually in 2019 went to Nancy's school, and actually, you know, these are pictures from the school. I love this one particularly. This is a young girl talking to Isaac, and, you know, to watch their interest, and they were riveted to kind of hear what was going on and eager to get involved. And, you know, for us, you know, to be able to use this and try to, you know, stimulate conversations and have people kind of engaged in kind of a different dialogue around race, around the prison system, I think is just crucial. And, you know, so this is part of it, being able to talk at, you know, in the Camden Public Library. We also are, you know, right now in the middle of planning a large reconciliation conference in New Orleans for May. You know, we've had a book launch. I mean, there's just so many exciting things that are going on. But let's, you know, Isaac, I don't know if there's anything you want to say to kind of wind up, but, you know, let's then take a few questions.
Isaac, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss before we got into questions?
We can go with the questions.
Okay. Should I pull out of the share? I'll just pull out of the share.
Sure, go ahead. Yes, we can always come back to those. Let me go ahead to go to gallery view also. At this time, I invite anyone who's here who has a question for our speakers to please go ahead and type it into the Q&A box or the chat box. I would unmute you, but they tend to not work very well whenever we try to do that. So my goodness, just to say that was a disturbing, heart-wrenching story just doesn't feel like it does justice to what the both of you went through. But I'm, you know, I had an opportunity to speak with both of you at times before this program, and just to hear it fleshed out like that, it was profound. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us about this. This is a story that people need to hear. And I encourage the people who've joined us tonight to share the recording of it with others that they know, because it's something that I think that we walk around with blinders on about. And there will not be change unless people take their blinders off. So I'm going to give people a couple moments to type in questions if they have any. I'm sure many of them are just feeling like I am right now, where just
it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot, and it is hard, and you don't want anyone to have ever gone through what Isaac, what you went through. So you had told me that you also have a support group for people who have freshly come out of, they've just come out of prison, they've just been released, and they're trying to adapt to life in in the modern day. Can you talk a little bit about that support group? And you had mentioned to me also that some of the people did the thing, some of the people were also wrongly convicted.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about that group that you participate in?
Yes, we have it's semi something like a reentry program, but it's a peer support group. And the facilitator is a good friend of mine, Tatum. He was in Angola also with a life sentence. He did about 27 years. In fact, he's confined to a wheelchair because he got stabbed up real bad in Angola at the time, and that's where he lost his ability to walk. And he's confined to a wheelchair as we speak. But he's the facilitator, and it's about little over 300 of us that's a part of this peer support group. And not just in the state of Louisiana, it's kind of spread now. Guys that been incarcerated, trying to come together to make change. So we come together to try to help other brothers and sisters that was incarcerated. Also, they are a part of the peer support group, and so we try and help them, because when they come home, most time these guys have been gone so long, it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, you were telling me like 30, 40 years.
Yeah, 30 and 40 years. I have one friend, he come home, he did 55 years. And one just had a party. We was at his birthday party. He did 52 years. And so it's them that's the kind of numbers that you're looking at. And these guys, so you could imagine meeting these people that have been in a cage for so long, until it's almost in time. We know time don't stop, and things are constantly changing, so you could imagine how lost they are to be thrown out of bondage into a free world of society and expect to be able to relate. They don't, my friend Michael, he still, I try and help him in every way I possibly could, because he still have the same mind that he had when he first went there. It's almost like time stops when you get in prison.
The trauma is,
and so, and it's hard to, some people are able to make the best out of bad situation, and everybody does it a different way when they serving time in prison. Guys, that's what they look for. They look for something to help them to be able to deal with their disposition, and so mine was boxing, and that would help. It would relieve a whole lot of tension off me, and I would just train and work out till I'm just drenched. So I don't have enough strength to do nothing but just take my shower and lay down and go to bed, And I would do that. Guys would tell me, man, you a machine. How do you work out like that? But I would just work out, come out the field and go straight to the gym and just start working out. And that was just my way of escaping reality.
As a coping strategy. I mean, that's exactly what it was. I mean, goodness.
Yeah, that's right.
We've had several questions come in, so I want to jump into those. Betty wants to know, so at this point now, has the murder case been reopened?
No, it hasn't been reopened, and it's it's a question that people often ask, and and nobody's interested in reopening it, including, I think, my family at this point. I mean, this is it's likely, and again, that you can get the details in the book, but it's likely that one of these guys in this threesome that was actually a friend of Isaac was involved in them. They're dead. So many people that come out of prison end up being shot or going back into a lifestyle that that ends up getting them shot, and that is the case here. And and it's interesting because for me at this point, I don't even know what point it would serve. My father's been dead and gone 40 some odd years. So, this is where the story lives. I think for me, I think it's where it lives for Nancy, and I think increasingly even my brother who still lives in Maine and who just recently met Isaac, and I have a sister that's in Monaco, but I don't think anybody's interested in trying to pursue anything.
Barbara wanted to know, is there any indication that anything has improved at Angola prison?
Well, when they got the new warden, they have a new warden now there. And from what I hear, I'm still in contact with a few guys there that's still there, that calls me periodically. And they said more younger guys coming there now. And it's a difference from when we was there. The murder rate went down. They're not doing as much because during my time in there, guys would stab you to kill you. But now with this generation that's going in there now, they'll stab you and break out and run. Yeah, they would stab you and just to try and survive. They're not trying to kill because they don't want to catch another case in prison. And when I was there, these guys didn't care about catching another case. And they come to stab you, they come to try and kill you. And they didn't care who see it.
Judy wants to know, Isaac, how did you stay positive and hopeful during all the time that you were wrongfully in prison?
Well, my mom, she played the biggest part, which I used to lie because she would always come visit me and the very first thing come out of her mouth, have you been praying? And she would visit me every week. And the same thing, I know what she gonna say when she walk up to me. She gonna look at me and hug me and she gonna ask me, have you been praying? And I said, yeah, Mom, I've been praying. Yeah. But what she didn't know is that, I would listen to her and I would tell her, yeah, I've been praying. But being in an environment like Angola, it's no time for praying. You have to look over your shoulder. You don't know if somebody want to try and harm you some kind of way, because guys was like vultures in there, and the things that they was into. Yeah, I need that on. Yeah, the things that they was involved in, they was institutionalized, program. And what I mean by that, they didn't think about the outside world. These guys are so institutionalized till they don't want you to hear nothing about what's on the outside of the prison. They're involved in what's going on there. And they live their life there to be content and try and be happy and try and be comfortable. And most of them, their way of being comfortable is trying to get another guy that they can rape and make out of their woman, and be happy. And that's what they mind at. They has that sick mind to whereas they don't want to be free. Most of them, they don't want to get out. They figure I'm here, I'll be here, I'll die here. So I'm gonna just be happy here.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, I think it's important, and then Julia, you can jump in, but I think it's important to not confuse positivity with how does one cope in an environment like that, right? I mean, one of the things, that I was so struck by in our conversations recently is, do you remember we had the conversation about boxing versus fighting? And
Right.
You're a boxer, right? And what you shared with me is you realized that when you were in Angola, even though you were boxing, you were in matches, right? I mean, they had organized boxing, but you were fighting, right? There was an anger, there was an edge, there was pouring it into that, and that probably did just allow you some outlet for all of the the anger and the frustration and all of that, and so I want to make sure people don't kind of walk away just kind of thinking, oh, you were like Pollyanna in prison and just staying positive. You really thought you were going to spend the rest of your life there, right?
Yeah, I thought I would die there. And in fact, me and that guy who you mentioned, Derek Robinson, D-Man, who was part of that 3 that was arrested for that crime a week later after your father was murdered.
Yep.
That guy, Derek Robinson, and he used to always tell me, he said, man, I know you innocent. But I never knew why he would say that, because at the time I didn't know he had got arrested a week later for that, and with the gun. I didn't know that. you know, to years later. So, and after getting that police report and finding that out, Derek Robinson, I was like, D-Man? Because we call him D-Monster, D-Man, but his name is Derek Robinson. So when Burl actually showed that to me in the police report, I said, my friend D-Man, who I talked to every, but at the time, when I found this out, that D-Man was nothing, then now everything came to me why he would always tell me, he said, man, I know you're innocent on that case, man. He said, but one day you're gonna get out of here, you know. But he never would tell me why. So, and a lot of guys used to tell me stuff like that. So it wasn't abnormal. Like guys used to come, they used to always tell me I have something about me is different. They can tell that I don't belong in prison, you know. So, and I used to hear that a lot. So it wasn't something unusual for me to hear that from D-Man. And but like I said, after I found out in the police report that he was one of the 3 guys that got arrested a week later, I had never got around him again. I never seen him again when I received that police report, because he was at Camp Jail on extended lockdown, and he went home from there. So I never got a chance to see D-Man again. And then when he wanted him home, he got killed.
Oh, Isaac, the last question that I'd like to ask you is, you know, you had mentioned that you do a lot of work with youths, and that one of the things that you're doing is you just want them to find ways to avoid the trauma and the experiences that you had. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of advice do you give them? How do you tell them this story, but still provide them with hope?
Well, actually, what I do is with these young kids, females and males, you know, I try and teach them discipline, you know, to do something that they enjoy doing, you know, because if you enjoy doing it, you'll be good at it. You know, if it's something that you don't really enjoy doing, you probably won't be as good at it, you know. So I try and teach them discipline, and they love it, you know, and I talk with them about certain situations, mostly about school, what's going on in school, what you're doing, and they constantly bring their grades. When they get their report card, whatever, they bring their grades, and they let us see their grades to be that they're doing well in school, because that's one of our biggest priorities. We want to make sure that they're getting good grades and they're being disciplined, because most of them that come there, they be like trouble kids, some of them, you know, and seem like they're going down the wrong road. So their parents will bring them to the gym for that reason. And especially once they hear about what we're doing with these kids and how the transformation comes about, how they come from this part into this part to now, they get to the point to where they don't want to leave the gym. And if something go on, whereas they, like one of the little kids, he had a little pocket knife with him at school that was in his book sack, you know, and he got suspended for that. So when he came to the gym, you know, I told him, I said, well, you got suspended from school. I said, now you're finna get suspended from the gym. You know, he said, oh, please don't know. Mr. Isaac, now don't take the gym from me. I done got kicked out of school now for a few days. Please, I need the gym. This is my only hope. This is my, you know, and he pled for and I said, well, you shouldn't have brought that knife to school. You're not supposed to bring nothing like that to school. And you're supposed to know better. And so he like cried, got all on his knees. Please don't take this from me, you know. And my heart, I gave him another chance. I said, I'm not gonna take it from you, because I seen in his face, and I seen that he was really sincere. And I know that he'll never make that mistake again. You know, and now he's like #1 contender.
Yeah.
He's #1 contender of the nation right now.
Oh, wow.
You know, yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that work. Thank
Absolutely.
you. And both of you, thank you for collaborating on this book. And once more, did you want to put up the slide of resources once more in case anyone had questions? And again, I know that Erica had written a question that you answered privately, but if anyone wishes to communicate further with you, is there any way that they can go about doing that?
Yes. You know what? Can I, where can I put up in the chat maybe?
Sure, yeah.
Let me put, yeah, I put my email and Isaac's, okay? I'll put yours, Isaac, in, okay?
Okay.
And again, if anyone misses it, you can just email me at the library. I'm jpierce@librarycamden.org, and I can get you connected to them if that's easier. So, and of course, please, everyone, go check out the book, Fighting Time. And once more, Isaac and Amy, this has been a very moving conversation, very compelling conversation, and one that I am so proud of both of you for continuing. And I hope to do my part to continue the conversation as well. And I hope everyone who joined us tonight does too. So thank you. Please look us up when you are next in Camden. It'd be nice. Love to see you in person.
Okay.
And I hope you get back up this way, Isaac.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I've introduced him to Maine whoopie pies.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
So this is new love. Yeah.
And yeah, I love those whippy pies.
Well, we'll have to show you a lot more fun Maine food.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I encourage you to visit librarycamden.org to find out about other upcoming programs we have. And again, check out the book, Fighting Time. Amy, Isaac, I wish you a wonderful weekend coming up, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Bye-bye.